For optimal listening pleasure, please use headphones. Welcome to the journeys of an astral traveler. What I am about to tell you will seem fantastical, or even impossible. Some may call these stories an act of fiction, or an overactive imagination, but I assure you the things you are about to hear happened, and they hold residency in my mind with vivid clarity, and the emotions tied to them. I can't truly explain why this happens. Perhaps it is coded into my DNA, or through divine intervention from our source, or God in other words. Giving a definition to these experiences are next to impossible. They are however very spiritual in nature, as you are about to see. So sit back and enjoy this journey with me. The year was 1984. It was February, and I was celebrating my 8th birthday with my family at my grandparents' house. We arrived just before dusk. I remember it snowing a few days before the weekend, and the temps were very cold. As we walked up to the door, I can recall the sounds of the ice and snow crunching under our feet when we got out of the car. I had been playing at home all day, and I was a little tired, so when we got inside, I asked my mom if I could lay down for a nap. I took off my coat and boots, said hello to my grandparents, then after about 30 minutes my mom set me up on the couch. The sunbeams from the sunset glowed through their front window, casting light into the kitchen and dining room. I drifted off to sleep within minutes. When I woke up, the sun had set and the living room was dark. I could see my family gathered around the dining table as I got up to go to the bathroom. My eyes still felt heavy and everything seemed a bit blurry. I returned to the living room and started making my way to the table. Just then, I felt a jolt, like a charged chill running through my body. I froze in my tracks, looked at my family, but I couldn't move, and they weren't either. As I stared for that brief moment, the room felt heavy, and I could see an aura everywhere I looked. Just then I snapped back, and even though it scared me a little, I walked into the kitchen like nothing happened. Maybe I was still tired, but we celebrated nonetheless, and I had a great time. When we got home, it was time for bed. I got into my pajamas, brushed my teeth, and hopped into my captain's bed. My mom came in to tuck me in for the night, and my dad followed behind her after he had put my sister down to sleep. I hugged my new ET doll tight and slowly drifted off to sleep. I started to dream, or I thought it was a dream. I saw myself entering a blue haze, but I was being pulled into it like a magnet. I flailed my arms trying to turn back, but I kept being drawn in. Once I managed to turn around, I was shocked at what I had seen. It was me, lying in bed, asleep. I should have been terrified, but I felt safe somehow. I could hear a ringing in the air, but it was like an energy calling me. At that moment everything went dark and I was expecting to wake up in my bed. When I opened my eyes, I definitely wasn't where I was supposed to be. Where am I? What's happening? I rubbed my eyes to refocus. I was in awe at what I was looking at. I was in the back seat of a car with my sister. Just then I heard my dad's voice say,
"Wake up, you guys. We're here."
This isn't possible, I thought to myself. I then belted out, "What are we doing here?" My dad laughed and said, "Did you hit your head or something? The Cubbies game, remember?" I played it off like I was still tired and said, "Oh yeah, I remember now." We parked the car in a gated parking lot, then started walking down the busy sidewalks. Inside I was shaken. Just moments ago I was asleep in bed. It was winter then, but now it seemed like spring. As we walked, the smell of food filled the air. We must have skipped breakfast, because I was really hungry. We came upon a Chinese restaurant. That's when my dad said, "Who's ready for the best steak and egg breakfast in the city?" My stomach spoke for me, and I said, "I'm starving." This was really trippy. My parents looked the same, even wore the same type of clothes, but I could feel it inside that these were not my natural parents. Once the food arrived, I could really see the differences in them. My mom seemed really happy and in love, but my dad was the biggest shocker. My real dad wasn't the best father. He was more self-centered. This dad, however, was infatuated with his family, cracking jokes, and always making sure we were happy. He would find ways to make us laugh, and he was very affectionate towards my mom. It was a breath of fresh air to see them so content and in love with each other. We finished up our meals and hit the streets to do some sightseeing. We walked around what felt like the entire city, and the sun was starting to bake me and my sister. I asked my dad if we could stop and get some ice cream before the game. He thought it was a great idea. We came across this little bodega just north of Wrigley Field. They had an ice cream sign in the window, so I tugged on my dad's pants and said, "Look over there. They have ice cream." So he grabbed my hand, and Mom grabbed my sis and picked her up as we walked across the street. We walked through the door and headed straight through to this big ice cream chest at the back of the store. The freezer had an old rope tied to the handle. My dad looped the rope around the hook on the shelf above, then let us have our choice. We walked back up to the counter to pay, and I noticed an old TV on the wall. It was playing commercials on the screen.
That's what gives it its great taste. Sun Country, say, "Give me the real juice cooler." If you don't say Sun Country, you'd better sleep with your lights on.
There's someone special I want to look good for. Me.
This was crazy, I thought to myself. These were the same commercials from back home, or was this my home? It all felt so real, but a part of me was still back home in bed.
It sinks right in for a softer, younger look.
Oil of Olay, beauty fluid or luxurious cream to help keep you looking younger too.
My eyes were fixed on the TV as my dad was paying for the ice cream. My mom was distracted with my sister when I noticed something happening on the screen. I pointed and said, "Dad, what's that?"
To bring you an emergency announcement. Please stand by for further information. We interrupt this program to bring you an emergency announcement. Please stand by for further information. This is an emergency warning from the NBC. The warning of a nuclear strike against this country.
I could hear my mom say, "This can't be real. This has to be a mistake." My dad replied with, "I don't think so."
Evacuations are taking place in the Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Washington, D.C. and New York City areas. Police will help you with evacuations.
My mom started to panic. Shortly after the message began, the crowd started panicking as well. The streets and sidewalks started to fill up. People were running everywhere, as the cars lined up behind one another, causing a major traffic jam.
Now you should begin preparing for the strike. You should collect 14 days worth of food, water, medicine, and clothing. Make sure you have a battery-powered radio along with spare batteries during the duration of the sheltering period to ensure you can get information and the all-clear signal. Nuclear strikes create fallout.
My dad swooped me up in his arms and told my mom we've got to get back to the car. As we ran out into the crowd, my mom and sister fell behind and we almost lost them. He turned around to grab them and realized none of the cars were moving. He then says, "We are never gonna make it out of here, we have to go back." He grabbed Mom's hand and he led us back to the bodega.
We can confirm the trajectories of the missiles are.
When we got back to the store, most of the shelves were empty. You could still hear the alert on the TV. My dad guided us back to the back of the store and began clearing out the freezer. My mom reached out and group hugged us and said, "I love you both so much." She then closed the lid, just like Dad told us. Me and my sis took our positions. I could hear my parents crying just outside the freezer. That's when the sirens started to wail. Such a chilling noise. I was terrified. How is this happening to me?
Important instructions will follow.
I must have hit my head during the explosion. I was really dizzy, and my ears were ringing like crazy. It was pitch black in the freezer. I was soaking wet and sticky from the melted ice cream. I called out to my sister, but she didn't answer. I found her laying in the opposite corner. She wasn't moving. That's when I felt a large piece of metal pierce through her body. She was dead. I started to panic as claustrophobia set in. I pushed on the lid, but it wasn't moving. That's when I noticed a small amount of light coming from behind my sister's body. I moved her aside and saw a large tear in the side of the freezer. I wanted out. I had to see what happened, and I am not dying in this box. I kicked the side where the hole was, loosening the metal with every hit. I wasn't going to stop until I was free from this coffin. When I finally emerged, I had to adjust my eyes, but everything felt like I was sitting inside an oven. The whole city was on fire, toppled buildings and debris was all that remained. I yelled out in anger. Why would you do this to yourselves? Why were you so stupid? I collected myself and started walking. You could hear the sound of explosions and fire everywhere, but a low rumble stood out. I looked up and saw the mushroom cloud climbing into the air. Like a rolling monster in the sky, it just kept climbing, knowing what destruction it had just caused. With every step, I could feel my life being stolen from me. An invisible killer was making me feel sick to my stomach. I was getting weaker the more I walked. My hands and arms were developing blisters. Then my nose started to bleed. My head started to itch, as chunks of my hair was falling out. It was just a matter of time now, before I am dead. I managed to reach Wrigley Field, but it was a flaming pile of debris and charred bodies. I fell to my knees. My vision was failing, and I felt so weak. My body fell upon the hot ground, my eyes were bleeding, and my breathing slowed. The smoke choked my last breath out of my lungs, and my heart stopped. It was finally over. I woke up back in my bed, covered in a cold sweat. my heart was almost pounding out of my chest. I started to hear a siren in the background. I sprung out of bed and ran to the window. I listened carefully and realized that it was just the volunteer fire department a few miles away. I was safe. What a nightmare, but why did it still feel like I was still connected to that place?